All right, so Dr. Michael Breus, how are you, sir?
I am great. How are you? How'd you sleep last night?
Well, actually, sir, Dr. Bruce, it was actually pretty good. You caught me on a good day. So
There we
you're going
go.
to love this, man, because I got to believe that you talk to a lot of podcast hosts or talk to a
I
lot of
do.
folks that they don't really understand the science of sleep and they don't understand the importance of it. But you're actually talking to someone who, while I understand the importance of it, I'm not that great at it. But you're going to dig this as someone who has made sleep his body of work.
Yep.
My youngest daughter, who lives in Manhattan, and we share our Aura sleep scores every morning.
There you
Ev-
go.
Every morning. So, since you asked, I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you last night I actually have a score to be proud of, which I'm kind of happy about since I've got you on the show today.
Sure.
My score was 75,
That's awesome.
and we'll start here because there's a question I want you to answer. Then we'll back up and kind of unpack a whole lot of other things because I want
So
you
I
to
just checked. My score was a 70. So you
uh,
beat me.
rock on. But all right, so here's what I want to ask you about though. So my total sleep was 7 hours and 8 minutes, which I'll tell you right now, Dr. Bruce, I'm usually around 6.5 to 7 hours, rarely more than that. But here's the thing. Okay, so my REM sleep was an hour and 16 minutes, which is a lot for me, but I can usually do pretty well on my REM sleep.
Okay.
But deep sleep,
Here it
dude,
comes.
I suck. I'm horrible.
Do
So,
you? Are you
oh,
sure about that?
yeah, I'm not. Last night I got 7 minutes. And for
What'd you get the
me,
night before?
I got 11 minutes,
What'd you get the night before that?
15 minutes.
Let's keep going back 2 more. What'd you get 2 more nights
Okay.
back?
1 minute,
Mm-hmm.
7 minutes.
So I think you're fine.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that and
So
help the
of
OCD
course,
aura
let's
wearers
go.
out there about
So
that.
this is the most common thing that I get. Well, actually, the most common question I get is what bed should I buy? That I think is in and of itself quite interesting. The second most popular question I get is what do I do if I wake up in the middle of the night? The third most popular question I get is what do I do if my sleep tracker score says that I got less than 15 minutes of deep sleep? All right. So you're in the party. We're all here together. Let's talk about it. So first of all, let's take a deep breath, okay? There isn't a tracker on the market that does a great job of measuring deep sleep. So accuracy is a problem. I want to be very, very clear about this. I think Aura is probably the best of the worst that's out there. There's also another new device that's just come online called a Happy Ring. What's interesting about Happy, and I think their website is Happy Sleep. I have no affiliation with them. However, they were FDA approved for full nighttime polysomnography in a ring. So it doesn't get any better than that. It doesn't get any more accurate than that. And so when you look at something like an Aura ring, which I wear and I use daily, you have to really be thoughtful about how you look at your data. So when we went backwards, what I was trying to determine was, did you have, 47 minutes one night and something? You didn't. Almost every single night, you were somewhere between 1 and about 13 or 14 minutes. Okay. So what I'm here to tell you is that the tracker is being consistently inaccurate. And that's
Okay.
okay, right? What we don't ever want to do. So you told me at the beginning of the show that you do something with your daughter, and I kind of cringed a little bit because here's the thing. I love the daddy-daughter thing. I want to be super clear. I've got a daughter who's 21 years old. I talk to her every morning. It's really one of the highlights of my day. But when you look at your sleep score every single day, and we know that the level of accuracy of this score is not really good, what you end up doing is you kind of end up setting yourself up for kind of a bad day, right? So how many times do you wake up, feel great, look at your sleep score and say, oh my God, I got a 46 or, whatever, right?
Yep.
So number one is what we look for when we're looking at these trackers, because they're not as accurate as they should be. We're looking for trends. We don't want to look at the individual number set, right? So as an example, with the deep sleep, if you're consistently getting under 15 minutes, if that's what it's saying every day, I don't think I care. Like I said, I think that's probably okay. Also, if you don't mind me asking, Jason, how old are you?
I'm 50, just turned 50.
So I'm 57, so we're not too far apart. So here's something interesting that you don't know. when we have people in the sleep laboratory where we have 27 electrodes all over their head and respiratory belts across their chest, and we're really doing it like right, and we're getting EEG and all that kind of good stuff. Did you know that we have to change our scoring criteria when people hit the age 50 because they don't get as much deep sleep?
No, I did not.
I can assure you that nobody has made that adjustment into their algorithm. Okay.
Okay.
So we know that there's an inherent inaccuracy there, right? And this is a proxy, right? So what information can you get from a ring? Well, you can get temperature, you can get heart rate, you can get blood pressure. Turns out that's better than a strap. I've got lots of patients who say, "Oh, what do you think about the Whoop strap?" Well, I don't think it's very accurate. Here's what I'll tell you is I think Whoop is an activity company that happens to measure sleep. I think Aura is a sleep company that happens to measure activity, right? The ethos is different. The algorithm is different. It works differently. I still use the Aura with almost all of my patients, and here's why. I think it's a good check against what they're doing. But what I have all of my patients do is I have them use a sleep diary. So for folks out there who may or may not know what a sleep diary is, it's a simple paper, pencil, like we're going old school here, and where you just answer several questions every single morning about your sleep. Now you might say, well, you're kind of in the dark ages, Dr. Breus. I mean, come on, with AI and digitalization and all that other stuff, why can't we just use these trackers? Here's what I'll tell you is when you wake up every morning and you have to answer 10 to 12 questions about your sleep, you start to think about your sleep all day long. And that's part of the progress. That's part of how we get you there. I'm not saying obsess about it because, by the way, there are people out there with something called orthosomnia. This is a situation where you get so into your data, it freaks you out. I was giving a lecture and somebody said, I said, Dr. Breus, my sleep tracker hijacks my day every single day. I'm like, bro, you're looking at it too much. So
Yeah.
number one, look at it at the end of the week. Look for trends and look for the delta. So if all of a sudden one day you get 47 minutes of deep sleep and then the next day you get 300, I want to know what happened on those days. Does that make sense?
100%, 100%. And I do think that, it drives my wife crazy because I do think I'm a bit of a data, I got a little bit of neuro, I don't know. I'm pretty neurotic about my data.
You
And
and me
so,
both, brother. It's all good.
yeah, I'll get so crazy with it. And also, I am someone too that lack of enough sleep, it impacts me, I mean, in a really, really adverse way. And
Sure.
I do, I mean, that's the closest thing I have to a hobby, Dr. Breus, is my health and wellness.
I love it.
That's the closest thing I have. I stay,
I collect Hot Wheels.
yeah, well, oh, nice. Like the old school Hot Wheels?
Old school 1968, brother.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. See, I don't have anything that cool. I don't have any hobbies that cool.
I
But
love the
it's
hobby of health and wellness, but I will tell you that sometimes when you double tap that hard on health and wellness,
mhm.
you start to just get so much information. It just becomes overwhelming. To be honest with you, that's the reason that I wrote my new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe. Wellness is too complicated because people just kind of don't know where to start or they get so overwhelmed by it all. And I want to be clear about something, Jason. I think it's awesome that you look at your health and wellness, especially at age 50, because so many of us are not
Mhm.
doing that. But
Yep.
I will tell you, as you mentioned, a little bit of neuroticism, a little bit of anxiety. When you start to walk down that path, sometimes you need a cheerleader to say, "Hey, take a break," right? It's okay. Because here's
Mhm.
the thing, you mentioned something. You said, "If I don't get a good night's sleep, I know it has an impact on me," right? It
Mhm.
probably does, but let's be fair. You've probably gotten plenty of nights of bad sleep, and it's not like your head popped off, right? It's not
Yeah.
like you turned to your wife or your partner and said, "I hate you and I never want to be with you again," right? We get these ideas in our head that are called cognitive distortions, right? So
Mhm.
we blow these ideas up a little bit bigger than they need to be. Now, don't get me wrong, you might be accurate in your assessment, but at the same time, what are the true results of what happens? Turns out, like, let's say that normally you need 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep and you get 5.5 one night. So now you're freaking out like, oh, today's going to be rough. And you start to predict all these bad things that are going to happen versus saying, hey, hold on a second. I didn't get such a great night of sleep last night. It's not the end of the universe. I'm probably going to be just fine. I may need to watch that I don't overindulge in caffeine today because that's going to be a thing that you're going to want to do. And I may need to be careful that I don't go to bed early because that's the thing, that's the cardinal sin that so many of my insomniacs do is they say, oh shit, I didn't sleep well last night. I'm going to go to bed early and catch up on my sleep. Bro, sleep doesn't work that way.
Man, and okay, so I think that one of the things, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the circadian rhythm because I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that impacts my sleep a lot. It's like I don't care if I go to bed late, and by late for me is midnight on. It's rare that I'm going to be up past 11 o'clock at night, and I
I
get up
get you.
early, and I get up really early. So
Yeah.
pretty much no matter how late I go to bed, I'm going to be up early. And
Mhm.
secondly, and even if I go to bed at midnight and don't wake up till 7:30 or 8, I'm gonna feel funky. So I'm thinking that's probably a circadian rhythm thing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I want you to talk to this audience about is like, why? Because a guy like me, and I think this is a circadian rhythm thing. I'm asking you to verify my
We're going to
hypothesis here.
evaluate you right here in front of everyone. Don't you
Awesome.
worry.
I love it, brother. Bring it. Is that like I can't go to bed early. I try like
You
before a
shouldn't
big
go to bed
trip or
early,
whatever.
bro.
I
You know
can't.
what
Okay.
chronotypes are?
Yeah. Oh yeah. From you. Sure do. Of
Yeah.
course I do.
So let's enlighten the audience for just a second
Yep.
about what are chronotypes. So a lot of people have not heard of this term chronotypes, but you've definitely heard of the theory if you've ever been called an early bird or a night owl.
I'm a
Jason?
lion, baby.
Oh, I'm not so sure.
You
I'm
don't
not so
think?
sure. Well, lions don't usually stay up until midnight, right?
I don't either. I don't. That's what I'm saying. I can't. I
Oh,
can't
you
stay up till
can't. So what time
midnight.
do you like to get in bed? 10:30?
Oh, 9:30.
Oh, okay. And what
And
time do you wake up?
I'm up late for me is 5:45.
Okay, so you are a lion for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So here's the deal is so first of all, let me back up and explain to everybody what we just talked about. So it turns out that there are not just two chronotypes. It's not just early bird and night owl. And by the way, we've known this since the 70s, right? We know that there's early birds, there's people in the middle. For some reason, they call them hummingbirds. I've got no idea why. And then there's night owls, right? So this is something that we've known forever. And by the way, it's genetic, okay? This isn't a choice that people get to make. How do I know this? Look, if you've ever done 23andMe or Ancestry.com, they have a report in there that looks at this and says your morningness or your eveningness score. So we know that there are different types of people. What I'm most famous for is I discovered a fourth chronotype. So what I call the dolphin. Now, by the way, I changed the names because I'm a mammal, not a bird. And so I said, you know what? We're going to have some cool animals in here, some inspirational animals. You know, Jason, we learned when we were creating the avatars and thinking through this when I was about to publish the book, The Power of When, which is arguably my most popular book. Nobody wants to be a porcupine. Nobody wants to be a platypus.
Go
So
figure.
right, go figure. So I said, well, here's what I want to do. I want to find animals that actually represent the chronotype that I'm saying, and they're inspirational. So you, as you mentioned, are a lion. So what are lions? Lions, another word for early bird. So these are my early morning optimists. These are the people that get up at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning naturally. Like they freaking love it. Like to be clear, I'm the opposite of a lion. I'm what's called a wolf. Right. So I don't like mornings. I don't even like morning people all that much. They're so chipper all the time in the morning. I don't want to talk to anybody in the morning. I just kind of want to do my thing. Folks in the middle, we call them bears. That represents kind of what I call a solar sleeper. So they like to go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock. They like to get up around 7:30. Then we've got the wolves. That's me over here, the night owls, if you will. We're more the creative types. Most of my artists, my actors, my musicians, those are the people, if you know any creatives, right, they never get inspired at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's always 2 in the morning. Then there are the dolphins, and so the dolphins are this erratic kind of sleep schedule person. And by the way, there's two types of dolphins. There's dolphins by circumstance, and then there's dolphins by genetics. So what do I mean by that? Dolphins by circumstance is, for example, menopause, right? So women who are going through menopause and their hormones are going all over the place, that is a situation that's fairly uncontrollable from them. But once they get on something like hormone replacement therapy, if that's an appropriate thing for them to do, then we get to see what their true chronotype is. Or maybe you live in an environment, right, where your kids are waking up at one time, your spouse is waking up at another, your boss is calling at some other time, and that can cause some of that stuff. So you have to identify what your chronotype is, and you can do that through a simple quiz I got on my website called chronoquiz.com. And it's pretty simple. It takes about, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes to go through the whole thing. And then once you figure out what what I call chronotypical swim lane is, if you stay within those boundaries, everything gets easier, right? And so what happens is when you have a bad night where you are up until midnight, right, your body will snap back. If you've been having a consistent sleep lane, if you will, that's what's going to work. And I want to give everybody out there one simple tip. Even if you don't know your chronotype, even if all this is like, oh my God, the science on this is too much for me, here's what I want everybody to do. Wake up at the same time 7 days a week. No sleeping in on Saturday, no sleeping in on Sunday. Now you might say, but that Dr. Breus, that's when I catch up on all my sleep that I've lost during the week. Come on, man, you can't take that away from me. Well, let's talk about the circadian science behind that, because here's what really happens. When you stay up late on Friday and sleep in on Saturday, stay up late on Saturday and sleep in on Sunday, this is why Mondays suck. Okay. Because what happens is your whole body shifts. If you do that 2 times in a row, your whole body will shift to that new later time because it's thinking you're actually moved to a different time zone, right? It's thinking you got on an airplane and went to some great place, where your time zones have changed. And so that level of consistency, I can assure you, if all you did was wake up 7 days a week at the same time, you probably improve the quality of your sleep by 30-40%.
All right. Now, some people are going to be listening to this and they're going to think to themselves, you know what? Sleep's just not that important to me. I just don't. How many times have you heard, Dr. Bruce, I just don't need that much sleep. It's weird.
I've
I
heard
just
it.
don't need that much sleep. And talk to this audience about the impact of sleep on your immune system, longevity, overall
Yeah.
health and wellness. Like why are we even having this conversation? Why do we care so much about sleep?
So here's what I can tell you is sleep affects every organ system and every disease state. Every single thing you do better with a good night's rest. When I work with professional athletes, the difference between being on the podium or off the podium is how you slept the night before. Every single time. Guaranteed. Sleep is the secret weapon for athletes, because they're drug tested and they can't use them. Sleep is a performance enhancing activity versus a drug, right? So we know that sleep is very, very important, but there are a lot of people out there who don't value sleep. That's okay. It'll catch up to them. I can assure you. Here's what ends up happening is when you're young, who cares how much you sleep? You can sleep on late on the weekends. You can sleep it off. I mean, when I was younger, oh my God, I was the biggest sleep offender there was, right? I'd stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning. If class was next day at 9, I didn't care. I'd get up at 8, slam a few Starbucks and head to school, right? So, like when we're young, our bodies are much more resilient. But look, I'm 57 years old. Okay. Like once you start to hit like kids, right? So once you start having children in your mid 30s, moving on into 40s, and then the kids start to get older and your body starts to get older, that's really when it starts to kind of kick itself into gear. And it also depends upon the type of career that you have. I'll give you an example. One of the people that I treat who's allowed me to say his name on air is a guy named Steve Aoki. So he is a DJ. Guy's been around forever. He does 200 shows a year. He's a
Wow.
freaking athlete, okay? That's number one. Number two, he's a shift worker. He doesn't go on stage until 11:30 at night, and he's jamming until 3, right? And so understanding what your body needs is very, very important. And it turns out sleep's a big deal. Now, can you have really crappy low sleep for a long period of time? Of course you can. That's the thing to remember is like when you're sitting in bed and you're like, oh my God, my head's going to pop off tomorrow. I'm going to make all these terrible decisions. The chances are pretty low because you've probably done it or been in this situation before. It's really about layering on these consistent habits that I think really helps people more so in the long run.
All right. So one of the things I want to talk about real quick before and
Yeah.
this is going kind of back to The Power of When, your first book
Yeah.
that I read and really wanted to put into practice. And the reason why is because I think it was is his name Dr. Jim Lehrer, who is the performance coach. The Johnson and Johnson's Performance Center. They
Yeah. Yeah.
purchased his. Okay, he started out teaching a bunch of world class tennis players and then other athletes,
Correct.
Josh Waitzkin and all these guys. And one of the things that he has always preached about his high performance athletes is that it's not so much that they are so skilled at what they do. I mean, obviously that has plays a part, but it's
Right.
the energy they deliver when they're doing that skill. Like it's all about energy management, not time management. That's
Right.
what I loved about. I took that and then I read your book not long after I read I can't remember what the title of that book was, something about energy. And I took your book to try to match
Yeah,
my chronotype
it's great.
so
That's a
that,
great idea.
yeah, so that I know, like, I want to perform a task when I have the greatest likelihood of doing really well at that task. So for this audience, again, I don't want to just skim over understanding your chronotype,
Yep,
because
let's go back.
it actually helps you with overall performance, knowing when to do the certain things, from eating to having sex to
Yeah,
all these other things. So kind of talk to this audience in real practical terms about
sure.
taking the chronoquiz.com quiz
Mhm.
and figuring out your
Yep.
chronotype and then applying it for better performance.
Absolutely. So that's the entire reason that I wrote the book so here's what basically happened. I'll tell you the story of kind of how I got onto this. I had a patient that I failed. I mean, when I say I failed. Like we tried everything. We tried cognitive behavioral therapy. We tried giving her drugs. We tried everything, and it was awful. We couldn't figure out how to get her to sleep. And when I fail that badly, I bring patients back in for free and I start interviewing. Like, I must have missed something. I must have missed something. About 2 hours into the interview, she said to me, she said, this is when I was practicing on the East Coast when I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. She said, if I just lived in California, my life would be great. I'm like, hold on. What do you mean by that? She said, well, if I could just do everything 3 hours later, like my life would be so much better. Now, let's double tap on this for just a second and think about the science behind this. What she's actually saying is if my hormones were matched with the times that I want to do things, then I would be able to perform these tasks in a much more efficient and better way. So I turned to her and I said, well, why don't you just go into work late? And she said, well, my boss wouldn't be too happy about that. My husband and my kids wouldn't be too happy about that because I'm the person who kind of gets up with everybody in the morning. I said, well, can we run an experiment for like a week and have you do this and see what happens? She said, well, if I'm being honest, I'm probably going to get fired next week. She said, I'm on probation, like I'm falling asleep in meetings. So I said, can I call your boss? So I called her boss and I said, hey, I got so and so here and I want her to come in at 10 and I want her to work. I said, actually, I want her to come in at 11 and I want her to work until 7. Are you down with that? And he was like, Michael, I'm firing her on Friday. I don't really care what you do. I'm like, okay, great. No pressure. So we worked the deal. We asked her husband and her kids if they would buy in for a week and see what happened. On Friday, I call the guy. The first words out of his mouth were, I got 3 more employees I want you to talk to.
Wow.
Right? So here's how this works. Is if you know your chronotype, this is all based on body temperature and your hormones. That's it. This is all biology. It's not like I woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to make up chronotypes and turn them into animals. No, this is like real science. And so what we do is we know when certain we know when you wake up, right? Everything kicks off and hormones go in a very particular fashion for everybody, right? But it's when you wake up that is the key factor of when those things turn on. And we know that melatonin production has a tendency to stop in people at particular times based on their chronotype. So this is all about matching hormones. And you said it perfectly. If I can match when my hormones are at their optimal and then I do an activity that is at that it requires those hormones, I'm going to do that activity optimally. So let's take sex because that is the biggest one that everybody likes to ask me about. Turns out that's the most popular chapter in the book is what's the best time for sex. So you need 5 hormones to successfully have sex appropriately. You need estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, and adrenaline all need to be high. And melatonin, the sleep hormone, needs to be low. So when we survey people, I think it's something like 75% of people have sex between 10 and 11:30 at night. What do you think your hormone profile looks like?
I guess it matches what you just said, right? I mean,
It's the opposite.
no way.
Melatonin is high and all of those things are low. So now we
Okay,
start
so that's when they're having sex, but they're not having the best sex they could have.
exactly.
Now I'm tracking.
Exactly, right? So when you start to look at that, then you start to wonder, I wonder how this would work. So what we did was we gave people the assignment of, hey, have sex in the morning and tell us what happens, right? And so it turns out that for lions, these are my early birds, that's fantastic for them. They love sex in the morning. It actually helps them focus and kind of get their day going. Dolphins, my irregular hormonal pattern people, they love it too because it helps lower their level of neuroticism and their OCD because they've had an activity that is working well for them. Now, here's the funny part is when we ask women only, here's what they tell us. They say, you know what? I feel better connection with my partner. And with men, when we ask them, they just say, whenever it's offered, I'm ready. So, that's not a joke. That was real data. right? So here's what's interesting is most people aren't married to a person that's of the same chronotype. So here comes the question. Michael, if I'm an early bird or a lion and my partner is a wolf or a night owl, when should we do it? Right? And so I actually created a matrix in the book. So you can put your chronotype on top and your partner's chronotype on the side, and we give you early evening time. So when you're not so exhausted that melatonin is kicked off, and an early morning time when melatonin is again turned off at that point in time. We also created charts for gay and lesbian because the hormones are different, right? Because you got two different sets of hormones going on.
Mhm.
So we've covered all our bases here, right? So sex turns out to be a very predictable pattern behavior for when you want certain hormones. So now let's step back from sex for a second and let's take a look at exercise, right? So I'm guessing, Jason, that you're an exerciser on some level,
Yep.
right?
Twice a day.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting is if you exercise at certain times based on your chronotype, you will perform better, right? And it depends upon the exercise that you're doing. Cardio is one kind of hormonal track versus weightlifting is another hormonal track. And believe it or not, team sports is a different one, and yoga and stretching is a different one. And we detail all this out in the book. There's over 240 studies in the book. And to be clear, these aren't my studies. These are studies that have been done by circadian researchers all over the world. And so my contribution, I think that's been so significant is when people take the chrono quiz, now all of a sudden you've got some guidelines like, oh, let's talk about alcohol. When should I drink alcohol? That is completely determined by your chronotype, especially the hangover part the next morning. So again, all we're talking about here is knowing and understanding your biology and then kind of giving yourself that permission to know here's an activity I should do at this time. Here's an activity I should do at that time. And to be fair, when you take the quiz, we send you emails for the next couple of emails where we give you some hints on that, like when to go to bed, when to drink coffee, when to exercise, things like that.
A lot of things that most people, and before I started really dialing into longevity and all
Yeah,
and the rest, you just take for granted. If I want a
course.
cup of coffee at 3 o'clock as a pick me up or something like that, I'll drink a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock, not understanding the long term effects of that caffeine high. All right. So with that said, I'm gonna, circle back to some of these questions I still have just for
Sure.
my own selfish wants. But I want to talk about your latest book, which is Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Simple Daily Habits for Profound Long-Term Health. Did I get it right?
Yep, you got it right. And so here's the deal with the book is I'm at the gym every day. It's kind of my thing. It kind of helps me start my day. I have a whole morning routine and I'm happy to go over if people have an interest. But I'm at the gym and I see people my age and they look lost. And when I go up to them and I talk to them, I'm like, "What's wrong, bro?" They're like, "I don't know what I'm supposed to. Am I supposed to do weights? Am I supposed to do cardio? Should I go get a green drink? Should I go sit in the sauna, Michael? Like, what the hell? What should I do?" Wellness is gotten too damn complicated, right? It just has. And so I started to think, my friend, I don't know if you know him, his name is Joe Polish.
Mhm.
He's a marketing guy, really smart fella. And he wrote a book called Life Gives to the Giver. And he talks about it in one section. He talks about this idea of dominoes, right? So a domino is a skill set that you learn that then knocks over several other skill sets, right? And I love that idea. And I was reading it and I started wondering, like, what are the dominoes of wellness? Right? Like what could those be? And so I started to say to myself, well, what are the most fundamental primary aspects of wellness and health, right? Turns out it's hydration, breathing, and sleep. You can go about 2 days without water and then things get really bad really fast. You can't go very long without breathing. I think the world's record is like 23 minutes, but that's set by these super duper like deep diving breathers and they do all this crazy stuff beforehand. I think Kate Winslet was able to figure it out when she was doing Avatar like to 6 minutes or something crazy like that. I mean, I could never do that. But sleep as well falls into that category. And my goal here with the book was to simplify it all, right? Somebody said this is a radical approach to wellness. I'm like, no, this is like a primary approach to wellness. Like if you get these three things right, everything else is gravy on the taters, as we used to say back in Georgia, right?
Mhm.
So like you have to think through this idea set of saying, okay, well, what am I doing? Because if I'm not hydrated, I'm certainly not going to get any benefits from my exercise. In fact, my exercise is going to do more harm than good, more likely. If I don't know how to breathe during this exercise, we'll use exercise as the example, right? If I don't know how to breathe during my exercise, I mean, you know what that's like? Go for a run and screw up your breathing. it will become very apparent very quickly that you slow down and you are not performing at your best. And then, by the way, sleep, come on. Sleep is like the most fundamental aspect of it all. And people don't really realize, but sleep is not just about performance, which is so far what we've talked a little bit about when we mentioned Steve Aoki and we mentioned athletes. But remember, sleep is recovery. Right?
Mhm.
Sleep is where you bring the car into the body shop every night and you get the dents and the dinks and all of that kind of stuff pulled out. It's always amazing to me where people say, "Hey, how little can I sleep and have it still be effective?" I'm like, "Bruh, that's the wrong question to be
Yeah.
asking." Right? Like you're trying to curtail recovery, right? Like that's never going to go well, in the long term. Also, injury prevention is another big thing that a lot of people don't think about. Like at our age, at 50 and 57, like the key thing here is don't get injured, right? Because if you're out for 3 or 4 weeks, you lose all the gains that you've had for 6 months before that, maybe even longer. And so the goal at my age, 57, is I want to be able to be active at the gym every single day. I don't have to push myself like crazy. I don't have to do hours of cardio. I don't have to lift weights, that are crazy. I just have to understand what my body needs and be able to kind of accept that. And that's really what the book is about. It's about learning about your body, figuring out what makes sense for you, and then doing these fundamental practices, fairly consistently.
Well, I'm in full agreement. One of the things that as I've gotten older, I used to be one of these guys. I'd wake up really early, like 4 a.m., and I would do this soul crushing workout
Oh,
every single morning. I would, unless I had burned 1,000 active calories, I thought that I had failed, and that's just so
wow.
bad for you. I mean, then I
So bad.
started, and then as I've been at this now. I guess had this podcast now going on almost 7 years, and
Wow.
I've got
Congratulations.
oh, thanks. And I've been able to talk to some very bright people like you about health and wellness and have become friends with them. And one of the things, Joel Green, who wrote The Immunity Code,
Yep.
brilliant guy, he told me, like, he said, "Look, your body's like got one set of tires on it, and you got to save the tread." And so
Right. I
I
love that.
started, and also what I started realizing is the impact of stress
Yes.
and how, okay, so you get the workout done, but you're putting so much stress on yourself to either get the workout in, which is a real big problem for me. Jimlyn and I, my wife and I, we travel a lot, and
Yeah.
I have a tendency to get real antsy when I can't work out. And so the
Sure.
stress of
Me
not
too.
working out, put too much on that. So you start to learn these things that the stress management, like you're saying, hydration, breathing, these very basic things can have such profound impact, and sleep. And so that's why I love having these conversations. Now, I want to take some of these things one at a time. I
Yeah.
do want to hear your morning routine. And by the
Sure.
way, audience, Dr. Bruce's morning routine may not, it's for Dr. Bruce. So
Correct.
let's listen for things that he does that might apply to you, because I guarantee you're going to tell us some things that have some universal application.
Of
But
course.
also, there's some things that are just for Dr. Bruce. But I love hearing morning routine. So tell me how you start your day.
Sure. So I wake up without an alarm somewhere between 6:15 and probably 6:35. It's just when my body now naturally wakes up. As I've gotten older, that has changed. It used to be 7:30, 8 o'clock. Now in my late 50s, it's kind of started to move backwards, which by the way is exactly what is supposed to happen biologically speaking.
And which
Um,
Dr. Bruce, I want to stop right there real quick,
sure.
'cause it's one of those little things that people I think will take for granted. I'm the same way, and I know you'll probably talk about this. I don't have a phone or a clock near on my nightstand.
Fantastic.
No alarms, because
Yeah.
alarms stress you out. You wait for them to go off. When they do go off, there's a shock, and that just shows that you're not dialed in, that
Right.
you're not listening to your body. So to me, one of the things I really clued in on right there, and I want this audience to understand, I want to highlight for them, is that alarms are, I mean, I guess if you have to have it to get to work, whatever your deal is, to catch a flight, but if you can avoid them, that has been a game changer for me. It
Absolutely.
has so de-stressed my sleep in my mornings. But anyway, so I'm sorry to
But
interrupt,
the
but
only way that works is with consistency in your wake
yep,
up time.
yep,
Right? And so if
100%.
you sleep in, like it takes about 28 days for your circadian rhythm to reset. So if you need to use an alarm for about 28 days, I'm okay with it. But then slowly start to not use an alarm on the weekends and see if you can get up at the same time. Right. And then start to move it out. So again, I wake without an alarm. And we have two French bulldogs that sleep in the bed with us. We love them. And when I get up, the dogs get up. So what do? I bring them downstairs. I let them out really quickly. Then I walk into my office, and this is more of a Dr. Bruce thing, but I think anybody can do it. I do a 20-minute meditation with the dogs. right? So I sit down on the floor. I've never been a great meditator. I want to be super clear. I've gotten kicked out of more meditation retreats than I think I've ever attended. It's unbelievable how bad I am at this stuff. I'm the guy that opens his eye and like, am I doing it right? Like, what's going on, right? So I found this headband that I use. It's called a Muse, M-U-S-E. I have no affiliation with them, but it actually measures your EEG. And then while you're listening to the music, the volume goes up or down, and that tells you how close you're getting to an alpha state. So you're constantly getting feedback
Oh,
without,
cool.
I know it's so cool, right? And then once you hit
Yeah.
the alpha state, these little birds start chirping. So you're kind of gunning for birds, right? The whole time, which is great for people who are like us, who are like, I want the data, I'm competitive, I want to see how this works, right? And so I do that for about 20 minutes. But here's what's interesting is both of the dogs put their head on my lap
Mm.
and I can hear them breathing, and then my breath goes with them, right? And it's really quite remarkable how we kind of just get in tune with each other because dogs aren't particularly stressed, especially French bulldogs. I don't know if you know the breed, but it's not like I'm dealing with a Chihuahua here, right? These are lazy ass dogs, and we can learn a lot from them. So once we're done with our meditation, I go upstairs and I feed them. Then I take them for a walk, and while I'm walking with them, I'm not listening to a podcast or anything like that. I'm having some solitude. I'm having some time to enjoy the nature of the walk, be able to see what's going on. That turns out to be quite important when you're talking about happiness and you're talking about mental health and less stress, right? Then I come back in and I've got my gym clothes on. By the way, I usually get ready for bed by putting on the clothes that I wear for the gym because I can sleep in them and then I don't have to go and find the clothes, which makes my life a lot easier. Then I go to the gym, right? I have a very specific routine. I have about 20 minutes of stretching, about 20 minutes of resistance exercise, and where I do at least 100 push-ups, and then I walk for 1 mile within 12, 15 minutes. That's my whole workout. It's not anything super fantastic. Then I hit the sauna for about 7 to 8 minutes, and I get home, and then I make myself breakfast. By the way, in the beginning, when I'm feeding the dogs, I do a 20 gram protein drink, and I do my supplements at that time. If we want to talk about supplements, I have one rule: go do blood work, okay, and see what you are deficient in. Because, by the way, nobody is deficient in ashwagandha, okay, but they might be deficient in vitamin D or magnesium or iron, and all three of those have massive effects on your sleep. So I discovered what my deficiencies were, and so now I supplement based on my deficiencies, right, in the morning time. But I've already gotten 20 grams of protein in before my workout, right? Because protein turns out as you get older to be a major factor in maintaining muscle mass, because that's really what the game is about. It's about maintaining muscle mass as you get older. So then I've gotten back from my workout, I come in and I make myself a breakfast. And so when I'm making food for myself, I've kind of started on this kick where I try to eat things that are made of one word, right? So eggs, turkey, green beans, asparagus, zucchini, whatever it is. But I try to, and so I make myself a scramble every single morning with 3 eggs, whatever the green vegetable is I have, and about a quarter of a pound of ground turkey. That's like 93% lean, 7% fat, because you want to get some fat in there. If I've got an avocado around, I throw it in there. I throw some hot sauce on it, some salt, Himalayan salt, and some pepper. I've had a fantastic meal, got great energy. And by the way, you didn't hear me mention caffeine,
Mhm.
right? I
That's
don't
right.
really need it. Like, this is the
Yeah.
level of energy that I have every day
Yeah.
without that, because I get sleep, I feed my body, and things go well. I want to be super duper clear. It's not like I'm saying against caffeine. Like, I get it. Like, there are people out there that want to have a caffeinated beverage in the morning, but do me a favor and hydrate before you caffeinate. Okay. A lot of people don't think through that idea set. If you just wait 90 minutes after your eyeballs open up and then have your caffeine, if that's what you need, it turns out to be much better. Let me explain. You need two hormones to wake up: adrenaline and cortisol, and they really kick into gear to wake your body up. When you add caffeine to a brain that's got adrenaline and cortisol rolling around, it's like adding weak tea to a cocaine addict. Okay.
Yeah.
Adrenaline and cortisol are very, very powerful. Caffeine isn't going to do shit. But if you just wait 90 minutes, caffeine and cortisol begin to drop. Then you add the caffeine, you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck. And you're not over caffeinating your body. And that turns out to be extremely important. That's my routine almost every single day. Even when I'm traveling, what I'll do when I travel is I have a travel workout that I can do in the room for me. And that's how I kind of overcome that. Because I'm the same way, Jason. If I don't move my body every single day, it stresses me out. And if we've got a second, I want to double tap on the idea of
Sure.
stress real quick. Here's one of the things that I think is important for everyone to realize is stress is the biggest problem in sleep. Period. Mic drop. I don't care what you I don't Here's what this is my prevailing theory. I think almost all sleep related problems are fear based. Let me
Mhm.
explain. When you're lying in bed and it's dark and quiet, you're at your most vulnerable position you can possibly be in a 24-hour cycle. If you don't feel safe, you don't sleep. Now, safety comes in many ways and shapes and forms, right? So you could have physical insecurity, you could have relationship insecurity, you could have financial insecurity, you could be worried about your kids, you could be worried. And what ends up happening is it stresses you out. Now, the stress I'm talking about here is your heart rate. Most people don't know this, but in order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of about 60 or below. Now, to be clear, there are people out there who've got hypertension and things like that, and their heart rate is never going to get to 60 or below. So it has to be at the lowest point of the day for you to be able to enter into unconsciousness. But follow the math for me for a second is when you're sitting there in the middle of the night and you're thinking about, oh shit, I got to pay my bills. What do you think that's doing to your heart rate? Or oh crap, exactly. Oh crap, my relationship isn't going so well. What do you think that does to your heart rate? There's no need to think about that at that time. You are imposing a fear onto yourself that is completely unnecessary. I watch a lot of motivational videos, and some of my favorites are Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and these kind of guys, and they all say the same thing. When they play their best is when they're most present,
Mhm.
right? When there's no distractions around. I think sleep is the same way. When you can be present and lie in bed and say, you know what? I don't have any problems right now. There's nobody who's coming in the door with a gun to hurt me. I've got a roof over my head. I've got food in my belly. My partner is safe. My kids are safe. If I've got a stress, now is not the appropriate time to think about it. Now is the time to be present and to understand where I am and that I'm safe. Then the natural sleep process has a tendency to take over because you've lowered your damn heart rate.
So I've noticed that whenever my heart rate like goes up the highest and really impacts my sleep is the night before travel. Now it
Oh,
doesn't.
dude, the anticipatory
Oh,
anxiety is a killer.
it's awful. Now, one of the things that I have started doing that works to some degree on nights like that is I'll do some box breathing for
Yeah,
that
I love
reason.
box
Now,
breathing or 4-7-8 breathing.
yeah, and the thing is though, I did not know until I was watching one of your videos actually about the heart rate of 60 or below. Didn't
Yep.
know that, but that's what was happening. But like if I'll go through some box breathing, then more times than not, that will finally I'll doze off doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't realize
You're
it. It was
proving my
because
point.
yeah, exactly. I was lowering my heart rate.
Right.
And so what are some other practical things people can do?
Oh,
Because that's a
sure.
pretty common one. You're traveling, you've got an early flight,
Absolutely.
and you wanna get to
Absolutely.
bed early. Like I told you, I can't go to bed at 8 o'clock and fall
No.
asleep unless I'm just
No.
exhausted for some other reason. So
Yep.
what are some practical things people can do on nights like that to set the stage for a successful night's sleep and still make their flight?
Yep. So, number one, it's not going to be a great night's sleep the night before for almost anyone. Okay. I'm just going to lay it out there. You need to know that and you need to accept that. So, for the days before you travel, you really want to layer in that consistency because here's the thing when you've got consistent sleep across, let's say, 4 or 5 nights, and then you have one bad night, the night after that, you'll fall right back into your pattern. You snap back so much faster if you have that level of consistency. So if you're flying out on a Wednesday, if you can make sure that you're waking up at the same time and getting to bed at roughly the same time, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you're probably going to be fine because Tuesday night, you're not going to have the best night's sleep because you're flying out on Wednesday. So that's number one is prepare for it, right?
Smart.
Get yourself some good sleep for the 4 or 5 nights before. Number two, don't over caffeinate the day before you're traveling, right? Super easy to do, right? Because you're stressed, you got to pack, you got to make sure your presentation is ready, you got to make sure that you brought your swim fins, like whatever it is that you're doing, right? There's a lot of stress in the night before travel. Great study was done, believe it or not, by Hilton Hotels, and they found that the night before you travel turns out to be the night that you get the worst sleep. Well, you and I have known this for years, right? That we've experienced that all the time. The second thing I tell people to do is don't stress about it, right? If you get a bad night's sleep, expect it and then do yourself a favor. If you need to take a 25-minute nap on the flight or once you arrive, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But don't make it longer than 25 minutes because here's what ends up happening is sleep inertia kind of comes in
Mhm.
and then boy your body wants to sleep because it's tired, right? So take that nap as early in the day as you possibly can, potentially before noon, and then don't go to bed early, right? That's the cardinal sin. Is oh, I got a crappy night of sleep. I'm going to scooch into bed an hour and a half early because I'm really tired. One of two things ends up happening. You get in bed, you're exhausted, and you're looking at the ceiling, you're just getting pissed off, which raises your heart rate and makes it difficult for you to fall back asleep. Or you're so damn exhausted, you fall asleep for 45 minutes, you wake up, and now you're fucked, right? Because now you're awake, you've dove down your sleep drive, so there's almost nothing left, and now you're going to be sitting there having a hard time with it. So I want you to be thoughtful with it. Don't over caffeinate. Consider taking a nap. Get good sleep for the few nights before, and you really should be in a great spot to be able to kind of handle that. Another couple of things that I always tell people is now this is going to sound crazy, but just bear with me for a second is if the night before you're traveling or if you just wake up in the middle of the night, don't go pee. You heard it here. You heard me correctly. Don't go pee. Michael, what are you talking about? Let me explain. Remember the 60 heart rate? What do you think your heart rate does when you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position and you walk across the room? Your heart rate gets jacked up. Here's what most people do when they wake up is they say, "Well, I'm up. I might as well go pee." That is the dumbest idea on the face of the earth. Here's what's really happening is most people are side sleepers. I think like 70 something percent of people are side sleepers. So when you sleep on your side, you're kind of curled up. You're putting pressure on your bladder, right? So I want you to do is if you wake up and you check the clock because you want to make sure you haven't missed your flight, which is of course the worst thing you can possibly do because it jacks your anxiety, right? Is just roll over and lie on your back and just do a little box breathing and relax.
Okay.
If you still have to pee after 30 seconds, please go pee. Okay. I'm not saying don't pee. Somebody asked me the other day, well, should I put on some Depends and just pee in a diaper? No, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Right. But don't accidentally increase your heart rate for no real apparent reason to do so. So if you don't really have to go to the bathroom, don't. And number two, please don't look at the clock. I know it's almost an impossibility, right? Because you instantly do the mental math and then you're pissed off. You're like, oh shit, it's 4:30 in the morning. I've got to get up at, 6, sleep, sleep, sleep. And you try to force your brain to sleep. Bro, in the history of time, nobody has ever been able to force themselves to sleep. Okay. Your energy's going in the wrong direction. Your energy's going up, not down. Again, heart rate is what we're really focused here on. Now, you mentioned box breathing. So for folks out there who don't know what box breathing is, you slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, you breathe out for a count of 4, and you hold for a count of 4. That's the box of the box breathing. Great technique. And that's one of the reasons why sleep, drink, breathe is in there, right? Now, one of the techniques that I like to use is a little bit different. It's called 4-7-8 breathing. This is developed by Dr. Andrew Weil for, believe it or not, Navy snipers to be able to lower their heart rate below 60, which is kind of our magic number. So, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Slowly breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, breathe out for a count of 8. Now, if you're wondering about the biology of how this works, let me explain. Most people are shallow breathers, so they don't actually use their entire lung, right? When whoever created this unit that we all seem to have was doing it, lungs are a very important part. It turns out, by the way, that your lungs are not identical. One lung has 3 lobes, the other lung has 2 lobes, but the way your body is structured is you're supposed to inflate all of both lungs. And then when you allow that amount of oxygen to circle in the system, it feeds all the muscles and all the brain parts and all the good stuff that you want, and then you breathe it out. But when most people are shallow breathers, the heart has to beat twice as fast because you're only putting in half the oxygen. Remember, heart rate is what we're trying to do here. So when you slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you fill the lung nicely. When you hold for a count of 7, you use up that air. And when you push out, you dispel all that excess carbon dioxide that's in your system. Now, here's what's my favorite part about this hack is it's a twofer, right? Because here's what happens for a lot of people. My wife calls it monkey mind, right? When you get up in the middle of the night and that thing just starts going and you start thinking about every possible thing, you can't think when you're counting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best part. So breathing in, you're counting for 4, you're holding for 7, you're pushing for 8. You have to think about doing that. Meanwhile, it's occupying your mind and it's lowering your heart rate at the same time. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's kind of interesting about 4-7-8 breathing. When I started, and you can probably guess, I got a little bit of anxiety in me as well, right? When I started doing this, I'd lose count. Also, I had a hard time holding my breath till 7 and pushing until 8. So when I started, I made a modification. I did 4-5-6 breathing. So I breathe in for a count of 4, I'd hold for a count of 5, and I'd push out for a count of 6 until I could work my way up to it. So number one, nobody should try 4-7-8 by themselves. I mean, maybe you're a great breather, meditator, what have you, but I certainly wasn't. I had to modify it to 4-5-6. The second thing is I lose count in the middle of the night. You need about 20 cycles for your heart rate to go down. So here's what I do. I don't know if people can see this, but I have a light fist in my hand. And what I do is I have 2 of these and I put them down by my side. And when I get through one cycle, I stick out a finger. When I get through a second cycle, I stick out a finger. By the time I got 10 fingers out, I know I've done 10 cycles and I go backwards. And by the time I get there, I'm so damn tired. My heart rate has gone down. Natural sleep process takes over. And I've occupied my mind while lowering my heart rate and allowing more oxygen into the system. That's why it works.
That's fantastic. And again, when I read James Nestor's book,
I know
Breath,
James.
you know, okay,
Great guy.
so that was to me when I first started understanding the value of and how most of us aren't breathing right. We're just not. And
Right.
people hear that and they're like, "What do you mean I'm not breathing? What's
Right.
to breathing right? You just you have to breathe, so you do it." And so that was a big game changer for me. Now let's talk about the hydration because I think there's misconceptions here. You know, you got certain people like I used to drink way more water than I do now. But I am a big believer in proper hydration and, doing things like, reverse osmosis and making sure that my wife and we buy really high quality
Good.
mineral water by the
Should.
case,
I
so
love it.
talk to the audience about how much hydration they should get. What does that hydration look for? Because not all hydration is created equally,
That's
as you
right.
know. So talk about some of those things.
So hydration turned out to be a really interesting topic for me to start to dive into and really learn a lot about. Everybody's concerned, how much water should I put in my body, right? So there's a million different recommendations. Here's what I've come up with is basically you take your weight and you multiply it by 0.6, right? So if you're a 100-pound person, you would have 60 ounces of water. If you're a 200-pound person, you would have 120 ounces of water. Now, to be clear, it'd be hard to force 120 ounces of water into me on a given day. And you don't want to drink too close to bedtime, right?
Mhm.
But here's what I see happening. And here's where I think the biggest cardinal sin is every time I'm at the gym, I'm going to fill up my water bottle and there's somebody right in front of me and they've got their thing underneath the spout and then they grab it and they go and they drink it real fast and then they stick their thing back on into there, right? And I'm the obnoxious guy at the gym where I'm like, you should sip, not gulp. And they're like, who the hell are you? What are you trying to tell me to do? And I said, and here's the excuse. They say, I'm just trying to get the water in me. And I told him, I said, it's not going in, it's going through. Let me explain. When you wake up in the morning and you walk into the kitchen, right, you got a sponge that's sitting there on the kitchen sink. And it's usually hard as a rock. I mean, you can bang nails with that thing, right? And if you put it under the faucet and you pull the faucet all the way open, what happens? The water hits it and splashes off, right? That's gulping. But if you slowly open up the faucet and you allow the water to drip on, what happens? It absorbs, and now you have a useful tool. You are the sponge, folks. You need to sip, not gulp. If I had 2 recommendations, it's try to get enough water in, before about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And so try to get, 60, 70% of your water in before 2 o'clock in the afternoon and sip, don't gulp. You're really going to do much better. I want to backtrack for a half a second and talk about an aspect of breathing that we didn't get a chance to talk about before, which is bad breathing. What could be bad breathing? Well, there's something out there called sleep apnea, and I thought it would be useful for us to talk about that at this point in time. And so what a
100%.
lot of people don't understand is all of this makes a lot of sense as long as you don't have an undiagnosed sleep disorder like sleep apnea, right? And so what you may not know is sleep apnea is actually a pretty serious situation where your throat collapses in the middle of the night and you don't breathe. Okay. Generally speaking, we like our patients to breathe. But what happens is most people don't even know this is going on. I've got patients who stop breathing hundreds of times a night, They have no clue. Their bed partner is the only person that says, "Hey, I thought you died last night. Like you were gasping and choking." And the person's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And they say, "That's a you problem, not a me problem." Nothing could be further from the truth, man. Well, here's the good news is since COVID, you don't have to go to a sleep lab and have 27 electrodes attached to you and spend the night. I can ship an overnight study to your house. Sometimes it's a ring, sometimes it's a wrist strap, completely accurate, and you can figure this out for about 200 bucks, right? So everything has changed now in that whole universe. So people don't have to be like, "Oh, I don't want to deal with a sleep lab and oh my God, it's going to cost me a fortune, and it's going to take forever to get the results." All of that with technology has really been trimmed down. I can diagnose and treat somebody in 3 days with sleep apnea, and then your workouts are better, your sex is better, your mood is better. So if you happen to have an underlying sleep disorder and you don't even know about it, but your bed partner says, "Hey, you snore like a freight train, and I'm concerned that you might have a problem," go get yourself tested. It's 200 bucks and you can get a ring to do it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So on that, so I will not every night by any means, but occasionally, mostly the nights I'm really tired. Sometimes when I'm dozing off, I
Yep.
will then all of a sudden just have this gasp. I mean,
Yep.
it's like this big snort, but
Yep.
then I go to sleep and never happens throughout the rest of the night.
Yep, that's
Okay.
normal. That we
Okay.
see that in every human on earth. It's called a central onset event. We see it in the sleep lab, we see it with everybody. You're noticing it because you notice things. Most
Okay.
people don't even notice it.
Okay. Well, my wife says I've got sleep apnea, and I'm like, no, I don't have sleep apnea because it's the only time it happens. And now Dr. Bruce has said I don't have sleep apnea, and so I'm gonna make her
Well, here's
watch
what I'll
this
say.
podcast.
Here's what I'll say
Yeah.
is you do not fit the profile for somebody with sleep apnea at all, right?
Okay.
Usually what we see is somebody who's got a fairly thick neck. So here's
Mm.
what's interesting. Any male who has over a 17.5-inch neck has like an 83% chance of having sleep apnea. It's like the single
Wow.
biggest marker in all of medicine, right? And so, I mean, honestly, dude, I could stand outside the big and tall store and just pass out my card and I'd probably have more business than I know what to do with, right? So you don't fit that profile.
Okay.
But here's what I'll say is for 200 bucks, it's probably worth checking it out.
Okay. Yeah.
Going
I
on.
may do that because again, anything I can know about my sleep and
Hey,
improve,
I got an
I'm here
idea.
for it.
Let's do that and then have me come back for part two, and
Okay.
then we'll discuss your results and we'll talk to people about sleep apnea.
Deal. I'll do it. I'll do it. Okay. So I'm gonna make a note of that. Don't let me, shoot me an email. Have Becky shoot me
Of
an email or
course.
something to remind me.
You
I'd
bet.
love to do that. Okay. So we've got hydration. We've got the breathing. Now again, I can't say enough to people just that I've learned about the breathing aspect of this.
For sure.
And then the final thing that I want to kind of land all of this on, that everybody, it's a
Yeah.
buzzword. There's all these buzzwords in the whole biohacking, which I hate that, whatever world, but
Sure.
this idea of longevity.
Sure.
So talk about how
Mhm.
your work, how it applies to, look, you're not going to guarantee that people are going to live longer, but as long as you're here, they get to live healthier by putting these things into practice. So kind of just concretely help this audience understand why the things we're talking about, it's not just a couple of guys that geek out on good health
Yeah.
and you've made a
Not at all.
profession of sleep, but this is literally the things that are going to help you live healthier longer. Kind of nail some
Absolutely.
of that down for us, Dr. Bruce.
So, one of the things we know about sleep is, as I said before, it affects every organ system and every disease state. So, everybody's got stuff going on, right? Nobody's in perfect health. And whether it's a diagnosable disorder or it's not, we know that sleep has a major effect on your immune function, right? And so, as you get older, if you're not getting good quality sleep, I want to be clear, it's not all about quantity, it's about quality. So you and I have been talking here, right? So you get maybe 6.5 hours of sleep. I'm the same way. I'm 57 years old. This is how I am. Sleep is flexible. People need to understand that there is no hard and fast rule. Everybody's got to get 8. That's bullshit, right? Here's what I can tell you is when we look, well, let me back up for a second. When you're getting information about sleep, you need to think about who you're getting your information from, right? So we talk about biohackers, right? I know all the biohackers out there. They all come to me for sleep problems, right? And here's what I can tell you is there are people who are on their sleep journey. There are people who are what we call a sleep expert, which means they do research around sleep. Then they they form a theory, which is unfortunately biased because they've only seen their research. And then there's doctors like me. I'm a sleep doctor. Like other people study sleep. I fix it, right? And when you fix your sleep, you are guaranteed to have a healthier, what now we're not calling them lifespan anymore. We're calling them health spans now. That's the new trigger word or whatever, right? At the end of the day, what I will tell people is it's not that complicated. Okay. If you want to live a happier, longer life, talk to people who live happy, long lives. Talk to people out there in your community or ask them how much they sleep. You'll be surprised. They all care about sleep. It'll be varying numbers because different bodies need different sleep. And by the way, sleep can change over time. I mean, one of the biggest things I deal with when I talk with women is sleep before your period and sleep after your period. Like it's different. So you may need different bedtimes before your period or after your period. And by the way, menopause, oh my God, talk about a mess. Like that really messes up your sleep. And so again, people need to understand that this is a fundamental biological process. Nobody out there forgot how to sleep. You've just added so many different stressors in your life that you think are more important than sleep. And here's why we do that. There's like a mechanism in your head that basically says, oh, you'll be okay, right? Oh, grab a cup of coffee. Oh, you can push through that. And it's true. You can do all of that stuff. But, sleep is a fickle mistress. Sleep will show back up in your life when you least want it to, and you will just be damn exhausted. And that's when the really bad stuff has a tendency to happen, right? Where our habits go into the toilet or disease comes right out. Like there are plenty of diseases that can be expressed due to lack of sleep. Now, I'm not here to scare everybody to say, oh my God, everybody's got to sleep this amount or that amount. But what I think people need to be is thoughtful, right? At the end of it all, I'm not telling anybody anything that they don't probably know. Right. And so, like we've gotten into the weeds on a couple of things, which is fun for people to kind of get a little tidbit of information here or a protocol there. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine there's anybody that's listening that thinks sleep, who the hell needs that? Right.
Right.
I don't think that exists. Or hydration, who needs that? Or breathing, who needs that? Right. And so I think from a longevity standpoint, what we can easily say is sleep's important. It needs to be an integral component into your health. And you know what you need to do. Just do it.
Yeah, I think that I'm really encouraged the fact that, again, going back to Joel Green, in his book, he talks about how we're so full of baby talk, these little things that really don't matter. And so I'm really glad that like with food that we're talking about things
Yeah.
in a more general audience about food and the inflammatory
Right.
responses it has instead of just, will it make me fat or not? That's just so silly. It's sleep. Did I get
Right.
enough? Did I get my 8 hours or not? I'm either going to be tired or not, as opposed to recovery and washing
Right.
your brain, that REM cycle, and
Yeah.
all these amazing things that happen whenever you get proper sleep. So I'm really, and same with breath and breathing and how that impacts. So I'm glad that on a larger, more general, other than just niche guys like you and I, again, that love to focus in on our health and
Yeah.
that more people are thinking, oh, there is more to this machine we have as a body, and if you figure out the levers you can pull, you can really get a lot out of it. And it goes back to
Absolutely.
where this started earlier, like going back to your other book I mentioned earlier, is that if we know these levers to pull, we can pull them at the right time.
Yep.
And I mean, look, that's how NASCAR runs, right? All the cars are supposedly the same, but if you know how to
Exactly.
use yours just perfectly, you get to
Yep.
win races. So,
That's right.
well,
Yeah.
Dr. Bruce, this has been a blast, man. So I'm gonna get I'll get the sleep kit. We'll have you
Yep.
back on. I'm so
Awesome.
grateful for that opportunity. And then with that, how can people follow you, learn more
Sure.
about you, pick up the book, and then anything that we didn't cover that would leave you feeling like, Dad gummit, I wish Jason would have asked me this. Here it is, bro. Let's what do you got?
Well, so here's what I'll tell you is I think you covered it all. And I feel very comfortable with the amount of information that we covered. And I want to save a couple things for the next time that we meet for sure. If people want to find me, I'm super easy to find on the internet. I use the handle The Sleep Doctor. I also own thesleepdoctor.com. So I'm not a tough guy to find. I do a lot of YouTube work now. And so if you get an opportunity to swing over to my YouTube channel, we've got extensive videos on every single time. I mean, I got 800 videos up So we've
Great
got a
point.
lot of information out there. And also, remember, look at who you're getting your information from, right? If you're getting your information from the Andrew Hubermans of the world, nothing wrong with Andrew. He's a smart dude, and I've spoken with him many times, but he's not a sleep doctor. He's a sleep expert. Like, he studies it, not fix it.
Yeah. Well, I will say one thing you guys are in agreement on. It's the not no caffeine. If you're gonna have
Yeah.
caffeine, don't do it less than 90 minutes before waking up. That was one of the things I was gonna say that earlier. It's like,
Yep.
I've heard that before. So that's
Where do you think
great.
you got it?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Hey, at least he's listening to smart people, man.
I hope.
Well, Dr. Bruce, this was a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much for being on the
Of course.
show. And I got to give my buddy James Quandall a big thank you for putting us together, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you too. And I just want to wish everybody out there sweet dreams.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.